Have you ever felt that something deep is changing within you? As if a forgotten part of your being was finally awakening, breaking free from invisible chains you didn't even know were binding you. Today I want to talk about something that can completely transform your life: the healing of your inner child. Carl Jung, one of the most revolutionary thinkers in depth psychology, dedicated much of his life to deciphering the mysteries of the human unconscious. And one of his most powerful discoveries was precisely how that child you once were continues to live within you, influencing every decision, every relationship, and every aspect of your existence. Before diving into the 7 signs that reveal this healing process is already happening within you, let me ask you, when was the last time you looked in the mirror and felt you were truly seeing the person you're meant to be? Not the mask you've created to survive, not the version of yourself that pleases others, but your authentic self. Jung discovered that many of us have lost connection with our essence because, at some point in our childhood, we learned it wasn't safe to be who we really are. Perhaps you had to grow up too quickly, maybe you learned your emotions weren't welcome, or possibly you internalized that your worth depended solely on what you could do for others. This is the origin of what Jung called the persona, that social mask we all wear. And the more you distance yourself from your inner child, the stronger that mask becomes, until one day you no longer remember who you really are. But there's good news. The path back home is always available, and when you begin to walk it, clear signs of healing start to manifest. The first sign that your inner child is healing is that you begin to establish healthy boundaries with others. Jung understood that many of our patterns of people-pleasing and self-sacrifice have roots in childhood wounds. That child within you, who perhaps learned they were only worthy of love when they behaved well, when they were perfect, when they put others' needs above their own. But when that inner child begins to heal, something extraordinary happens. You start to recognize that your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. You begin to say no without feeling guilty. You establish clear boundaries because you understand that true love will never ask you to betray yourself. Have you caught yourself declining invitations to events you used to accept out of obligation? Have you started expressing your true feelings instead of smiling and nodding? Have you stopped responding immediately to every message, giving yourself permission to exist in your own space and time? These are powerful signs that your inner child is beginning to trust you, beginning to believe that now you will protect them. The second sign is that the opinions of others no longer have the same power over you. Jung taught us that we develop our persona, that social mask, precisely to fit in, to be accepted by our tribe. It's a childhood survival mechanism that many of us continue to drag along even decades later. When your inner child begins to heal, you stop desperately needing external validation. It's not that you become indifferent to others. It's that you can now differentiate between constructive criticism and opinions that simply don't resonate with your truth. That freedom, that feeling of not being constantly concerned with what others think, is a clear sign that you're reclaiming your personal power. Think for a moment. Do you remember the last time someone criticized you, and instead of feeling devastated for days, you could simply consider if there was anything useful in that criticism and discard the rest? Or that time when you made a decision knowing not everyone would approve, but you felt a deep peace because it was right for you? That's your inner child telling you, we no longer need everyone's approval to feel safe. The third sign is that you start reconnecting with your true passions and desires. Jung spoke extensively about how the process of individuation, that path toward authenticity, involves rediscovering what truly gives us joy, beyond what we've learned we should desire. Do you remember those things you loved to do when you were little, before the world told you what was productive or valuable? Maybe it was painting, writing stories, exploring nature, dancing as if nobody was watching. When the inner child heals, those genuine interests begin to resurface. Perhaps you've recently surprised yourself by buying art supplies after decades without drawing. Or maybe you've felt an unexplainable desire to learn something completely new, something that has no practical utility, but makes your eyes shine with enthusiasm. That reconnection with authentic pleasure, with natural curiosity, is a powerful sign that your inner child is beginning to trust life again. The fourth sign is that your relationships begin to transform profoundly. Jung understood that we project onto others both our wounds and our unrecognized qualities. When an inner child is wounded, we often attract relationships that replicate painful patterns from our childhood, unconsciously seeking to resolve what remained unfinished. But when that inner child begins to heal, your relationships reflect that change. People you used to tolerate despite their toxic behaviors no longer fit into your life. You begin to attract people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your authenticity, who don't try to mold you according to their needs. Have you noticed that some relationships have naturally distanced while others have deepened? Or that you're meeting new people who seem to appreciate precisely those parts of yourself that you used to hide? This reconfiguration of your social universe is a direct reflection of your inner transformation. The fifth sign is that you begin to integrate your shadow. This is one of Jung's most powerful concepts. The shadow represents all those parts of ourselves that we've repressed, denied, or rejected, because they didn't fit with the ideal image we were trying to project. When your inner child heals, you start making peace with aspects of yourself that used to embarrass you. Perhaps you recognize that your anger has an important message to communicate, that your sadness contains a deep wisdom, that even your defects form an integral part of who you are. Have you caught yourself admitting vulnerabilities you would have hidden at all costs before? Have you begun to see your imperfections not as failures, but as facets that make you human, authentic, and complete? This process of shadow integration is perhaps one of the most transformative steps on the healing journey. The sixth sign is that your relationship with your body begins to change. Jung understood that the body is not simply a vehicle for the mind, but a field of experience where our deepest truths manifest. A wounded inner child often reflects in a conflicted relationship with our physical body. When healing begins to occur, you start listening to your body instead of trying to control or ignore it. You begin to feel the difference between physical and emotional hunger. You start moving because it feels good, not as punishment. You begin to rest when you're tired without feeling guilty about it. Have you noticed that lately you pay more attention to your body's signals? That you can distinguish between stress and intuition? That you treat your body with more compassion, as you would treat a child who needs care? This reconciliation with your physical dimension is a direct reflection of the inner healing that's occurring. And the seventh sign, perhaps the deepest of all, is that you begin to experience a new form of inner peace. Jung described the individuation process as a path towards psychic wholeness, toward the integration of all the fragmented parts of our being. And when that integration begins to happen, a sense of peace emerges that doesn't depend on external circumstances. It's not that you no longer feel fear, sadness, or uncertainty. It's that you can now hold these emotions without being dragged down by them. There's an internal presence, a compassionate witness that remains stable even in the midst of the storm. That presence is your authentic self emerging as your inner child heals. Have you experienced moments when, despite external difficulties, you feel a strange confidence that everything will be okay? Have you noticed that you can remain centered even when life becomes chaotic? Have you felt that you no longer need to control everything because there's a deeper wisdom guiding you? These are the most precious fruits of inner work. But let me be completely honest with you, this healing path is neither linear nor always comfortable. Jung taught us that to integrate our shadow, to reconcile with our wounded inner child, we must be willing to face what we've avoided. And that confrontation can awaken emotions we've kept buried for years or even decades. There will be days when you'll feel like you're going backward, when old patterns will try to resurge strongly. Moments when the voice of the inner critic will become louder, trying to convince you that this path is too difficult, that it's better to return to the safety of the familiar, even if the familiar is slowly destroying you. It's in those moments when you most need to remember that resistance isn't a sign of failure, but a natural part of the transformation process. Jung compared this journey to alchemy. For gold to emerge, it must first pass through fire. And every time you choose to move forward despite fear, every time you offer compassion to that frightened child within you instead of judging them, you're strengthening your connection with your authentic self. The good news is that you don't have to make this journey alone. In fact, Jung firmly believed in the power of community to sustain our individuation process. When you allow yourself to be seen in your vulnerability, when you share your story with those who have earned the right to hear it, you're creating a field of resonance that amplifies your healing. Have you noticed how, since you began this path of self-knowledge, people with similar interests have started appearing in your life? How you find books, conversations, or even videos like this just when you need them most? Jung called this synchronicity, the mysterious connection between your inner and outer worlds that manifests when you're aligned with your deepest purpose. But now I want to speak directly to you, to that child within you who may have been waiting decades to be heard. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where your emotions were inconvenient, where you learned that being perfect was the only way to be loved, where you became the caretaker of others long before anyone properly took care of you. I want you to know that none of that was your fault. You were a child doing the best you could with the tools you had available. You developed those masks, those defense mechanisms, those patterns of people-pleasing or rebellion, because at that moment it was what you needed to survive. And that capacity for adaptation, although it may be causing you pain now, was, at that time, an act of profound intelligence and self-love. But now you're an adult, and you have resources you didn't have then. You have the ability to look back with compassion, to recognize the wounds without getting trapped in them, to offer that child what they needed so much: your unconditional presence, your validation, your promise that they'll never have to face the world alone again. Jung taught us that true transformation begins when we stop seeking salvation outside and recognize that the healer and the wounded coexist within us. When the adult you are now becomes the parent that inner child always needed. And every time you choose authenticity over approval, every time you honor your own needs instead of sacrificing them, every time you allow yourself to fully feel instead of numbing your emotions, you're sending a powerful message to that child. I'm here. I see you. And you'll never have to hide to be loved again. This is the essence of the process Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming the person you truly are, beyond social expectations, beyond family conditioning. It's a path that requires courage, patience, and an unwavering willingness to look at yourself honestly. But each step you take in this direction brings you closer to a life of authenticity, connection, and purpose. And you know what's most beautiful about all this? When you heal your inner child, you're not just freeing yourself. You're breaking chains that may have existed in your family lineage for generations. You're creating new possibilities not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. Because when you live from your authenticity, you inevitably inspire others to do the same. Imagine for a moment a world where we all did this work, where we all dared to look at our wounds with compassion instead of projecting them onto others, where we all chose authenticity over the social mask. Wouldn't that be a radically different world? Jung believed that individual transformation is the only real basis for collective change. And every time you recognize one of these 7 signs in your own life, every time you celebrate the progress of your inner child, you're contributing to that collective transformation in ways you might not even imagine. Before I say goodbye, I want to leave you with a question. Which of these 7 signs resonates most deeply with you at this moment in your life? Can you identify concrete situations where you've noticed your inner child is healing? I invite you to share your experience in the comments, not only because I love connecting with you at that level, but because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Remember that on this healing path, we are all both students and teachers, all constantly learning and teaching through our shared experiences. If this message has resonated with you, I would greatly appreciate if you would give it a like and share it with someone you think might benefit from hearing it. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I invite you to do so now and activate the notification bell so we can continue deepening together into these topics that have the power to transform our existence from the root. I also want to remind you that I have other videos exploring different aspects of Jung's work and depth psychology that could perfectly complement what we've discussed today. You'll find them suggested at the end of this video. Thank you for being here, for your presence, for your willingness to do this deep work. In a world that constantly pushes us outward, toward distraction and superficiality, your decision to turn inward, to recover the connection with your essence, is an act of courage and rebellion that deserves to be celebrated. Always remember Jung's words. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. And you, my dear friend, are awakening. Until the next video.